Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today it is part 5 of the series. If you guys haven't watched my video from yesterday, I did part 4, which was George the First. So here is part 5. My top 20 favorite British monarchs in English history. Part 5, Richard II, King of England. And guys, we have 15 more monarchs to do. So far, I've done Richard III for part 1, James II, George III, and George I. And now we are doing Richard II. And guys, did you guys know that Richard II was actually king when he was 10 years old? He had a cousin named Henry, but he had his crown stolen in 1399, and he only reigned for 20 years, by the way, from 1377 to 1399, but he died just a year on Valentine's Day, just a year after he lost the throne in 1399. He died in 1400. He was either possibly murdered by starvation, or he was just killed by his cousin Henry, who became Henry IV. And I do like Henry IV, but who says what? Who says what? And I'm very sorry, guys, if you can hear the background noise. It's because they are doing our roof today. So you will probably hear some really loud background noise, which I don't really like background noise, and it's actually bad because it distracts my videos kind of, but yeah. So with that out of the way, I have researched Richard II's life about him, and oh my god. Oh my. Okay, so let's get started. Richard II was born on the 6th of January, 1367, and died on the 14th of February, 1400. Also known as Richard Bonadelux, was King of England from 1377 until he was deposed in 1399. He was the son of Edward, Prince of Wales, later known as the Black Prince, and Joan Countess of Kent. Richard's father died in 1376, leaving Richard as heir apparent to his grandfather, King Edward III. Upon the latter's death, the 10-year-old Richard succeeded to the throne. His grandfather was actually King Edward III, who reigned for an astonishing 50 years, by the way. He reigned from 1327 after Edward II's death until his death in 1377, 1 year after the Black Prince died, which was Edward, Prince of Wales. And this is the portrait. His portrait at Westminster Abbey in the mid-1390s. And he was actually the first British monarch to have his portrait painted. And, yeah, I like it. It's pretty good. There was another one, and the face was weird. King of England. He reigned on the 21st of June, 1377, until the 29th of September, 1399. His coronation was on the 16th of July, 1377. His predecessor was his grandfather, Edward III, and his successor was his cousin, Henry IV. He was born on the 6th of January, 1367, in Bordeaux, in France, and he died on the 14th of February, 1400, at the age of 33, in part5 Castle in Yorkshire, England. He was buried in Dominican Ferry King's Ledger in Hertfordshire from 1400 until 1413 for 13 years, and was moved into Westminster Abbey in London since 1413. Now, when I looked on George I's research, I thought he had 2 wives, but no, he only had 1. Richard II had 2 wives. Yes, I did. Like I said, I didn't mention Richard III's wife. James II had 2. So he had 2 wives. His first wife was Anna of Bohemia, They were married in 1382, but she died in 1394. And his second wife was Isabella of Vanos. They were married in 1396. His father was Edward the Black Prince, and his mother was Joan of Kent. And he is the Plantagenet king. During Richard's first years as king, government was in the hands of a series of regency councils influenced by Richard's uncles, John of Gaunt and Thomas of Woodstock. England at the time faced various problems, most notably the 100 Years' War. By the way, the 100 Years' War was started by Richard II's grandfather, Edward III, which was started in 1338. I think it was in 1338. I'm not too sure. A major challenge of the reign was the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, and the young king played a central part in the successful superation of this crisis. Less warlike than either his father or grandfather, he sought to bring an end to the 100 Years' War. A firm believer in the royal prerogative, Richard restained the power of the aristocracy and revealed on a private retreat for military protection instead. In contrast to his grandfather, Richard cultivated a refined atmosphere centered on art and culture at court, in which the king was an elevated figure. The king's dependence on a small number of courtiers contained discontent among the influential, and in 1387 control of government was taken over by a group of aristocrats known as the Lords of Parliament. By 1389, Richard had reigned control, and for the next 8 years governed in relative harmony was his former opponents. In 1397, he took his revenge on the Parliaments, many of whom were executed or exiled. The next 2 years have been described by historians as Richard's tyranny. In 1399, after John of Gaunt died, the king disinherited Grant's son, Henry Bolingbroke. Henry Bolingbroke? What type of last name is that? Henry Bolingbroke. What the hell? Who had previously been exiled. Henry invaded England in June 1399 with a small force that quickly grew in numbers. Meeting little resistance, he deposed Richard and had himself crowned king. Richard is thought to have been starved to death in captivity, although questions remain regarding to his final fate. Richard's posthumous reputation had been shaped to a large extent by William Shakespeare, whose play Richard II portrayed Richard's misrule and his deposition as responsible for the 15th century Wars of the Roses. Modern historians do not accept this interpretation, while not exonerating Richard from responsibility of his own deposition. While probably not insane, as many historians of the 19th and 20th centuries believed him to be, he may have had a personality disorder, particularly manufacturing himself towards the end of his reign. Most authorities agreed that his policies were not unrealistic or even entirely unpredicted, but that the way in which he carried them out was unacceptable to the political establishment, leading to his downfall. So, we're not sure if he was either starved to death or he was killed by his cousin, which is a mystery. Or we know he was murdered just 1 year after. Well, I on Valentine's Day, you might say. And, I have a fun fact for you. Did you guys know that Richard II was the first English king to have his portrait painted back in the mid-1390s? Yes, I'm not being funny. He actually had his portrait painted in the midway through 1390s, some point between either 1395 or 1396. Yes. Also, when he died, he was 32 because he reigned for 22 years. I think because I'm going to rate Richard II. I'm also going to rate him an 8, just like George I, 8 out of 10. Well, because technically he did execute some people during his reign in 1399, and his cousin was in exile in France, and then, just a quick reminder, the funny last name, Bolingbroke, I'm not really sure what it means. I don't know if it's a city or is it not. Let me just have a look. Let's see. Oh, it's in Lincolnshire. It is actually a city in Lincolnshire in England. So technically he was born in Lincolnshire. And, yeah, it's very funny when you say Henry Bolingbroke. Well, Richard was born in France, but he was King of England. It's like George II. I mean, not George II. I keep saying George II. I mean, George I. He was a German prince. He was born in Hanover, by the way, in Germany. And he didn't really know English because he refused to learn the language. We know he can't speak it, but he knows how to read it and write it. But because he doesn't like doing England, he was king of Great Britain and Ireland, not England, Great Britain and Ireland. He was also king of Ireland, which I have no clue why. Why was he king of Ireland as well? I don't know. But he became king in 1714. But he only reigned for 13 years, just like some other kings would. But obviously Richard II was only reigned for 22. The same as probably James II. Also, not James II. I mean James I. The great-grandfather of George I. Yeah, George I had he is the great-grandson of James I and 6th of Scotland. Now, obviously, he did have a grandson. He also had a granddaughter, which was George I's mother, Sophia of Hanover, and his wife was Anne of Denmark. I think that was George I's grandmother, something like that. I don't know. I don't know if that was his great-grandmother. I'm not sure, is that his great-grandmother? But his great-grandfather was I am so sorry. I cannot speak. James I. I keep saying George. George I has a mother, but she died in 1714. There were 3 deaths during when George became king. There was 2 deaths in England and 1 in France. There were 3 people who died in 1714. His mother, Sophia of Hanover, who died 2 months before Queen Anne did. She died in her 80s. Queen Anne died also in 1714. She died in August 1714. But she died of obesity because she suffered a stroke which caused obesity. She had really bad Hughes syndrome where the blood was very sticky, and she lost all of her 18 children. In 1700, she lost her only son, Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, who died at the age of 11 due to an unknown illness or an unknown cause. And then the French king Louis XIV also died in 1714. He died of either cancer or of an unknown illness, or either smallpox, or he either suffered a stroke as well, like other people did. He was the cousin of Charles II and James II. He had 2 people who was his cousin, but George didn't go to France because we don't know if he was actually... I don't know. And then that's when George I became king of Great Britain and Ireland in 1714. He suffered a stroke in 1727 on his carriage on the way to Hanover. He was also buried in Hanover. He was the last British king to be buried outside of England or Britain. And yeah, obviously, in 1760, there was one death that happened. His son, George II, who he didn't get along with his father. George II really hated his father because of his cruelty and because he married his cousin, Sophia Dorothea, in 1682, but in 1694, they were divorced. He throned her in the Tower of London, and she died. She suffered a stroke at the age of 60. And 4 weeks later, in the same, actually, she died in the same year. She died in 1727. But 4 weeks later, Henry George I also suffered a stroke. Oh my God! Yeah, yeah. I just feel bad for them. When George II was married to Caroline of Queen Caroline, she had one son, like a few children, but one of the children was Prince George, who was born in 1717 but died 1 year later in 1718. He died of a puncture on his heart 3 months old. Technically he died at 3 months old. And I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Part 6 will be coming out soon.